Hi everyone, I'm back again, and this is just a short video on a stormy sky with a low horizon point. So I draw it out first with my 2B pencil, just give me a few rough guidelines, and I'm only partially wetting the top part where the sky is going to be. A lot of the areas that I'm pointing to are dry areas. So I'll start just by putting in some dark colour. My colours were at the beginning of this video, but this is a mixture of burnt sienna and French ultramarine blue. So I mix them together and I start with my little round brush, and into the wetted areas I dance the colours across my page. I like using diagonals in my skies. I've done it before and I've talked about that before. I think it gives more action, especially for a stormy sky. So you won't see me doing horizontal cloud formations, not too often anyway. And while the page is wet, I can still keep adding a little bit more pigment as I go. And I'm also using my brush just dampened with some fresh water to spread some of the paint and get a different value. Just watching that paint bleed into the wet areas is rather exciting. So I'm bringing my painted areas down to where my horizon point will be, and that's a low horizon point because I'm going to have a little bit of a landmass showing. I'm also darkening my top right-hand corner. I think that's it locks the eye in and it tends to make the viewer keep looking downwards towards my moment of impact where it meets the horizon. And next I get a paper towel. I use Viva paper towels, they're very soft, and I wet just one end of it, squeeze it out so it's only damp, and I start sculpting the clouds with the paper towel. And it's going to work much better in the really dark areas. You're going to see more of an impact when you blot out some of those areas. And I'm using this in a very sculptural way. I twist my wrist around and I press hard in some places, but I press lightly in other places. So I'm going to get a degree of value even within some of these blotted areas. You can keep turning your paper towel around and inside out so that you get a drier area of the paper towel and blot a little bit more. It's going to remove a lot more paint when you have a drier area of the towel. But generally I use a dampened part of the paper towel. And here I've just kind of rolled the towel in my two hands and I'm blotting with a rolled piece. I know that's a little hard to understand, but I think you can see what I'm talking about. My next step is to reinforce around and behind some of the areas that I've taken out, still using my mix of colours of burnt sienna and French ultramarine blue, and just occasionally giving a little bit more depth behind some of those areas. It gives a nice rim light effect. You know, when you've got the light behind the clouds, it's kind of nice to push it when you've got some darks right behind that area. And still softening some areas with my damp brush, just a little bit. And I've also tilted my page a tiny bit too, helping me with the gravity of it, so that that's going to help drag the paint down a little bit further. You don't want dots everywhere. You want to soften the dots as I've just done there. Keep it softer. Go back to the paper towel and use that if you need to. You can do it tentatively at first and then you can start pressing a little harder. So you're going to remove a little bit more paint. So it's a matter of you just playing with the idea of the shapes that you can see or that you feel, because this is a made-up composition. I haven't got a picture in front of me. Now, this is really a dry area, so I'm using wetting to dry technique. but I'm just establishing the hillside. I've added the same colours that I've used in the sky, but I've added a tiny little bit of permanent rose into that as well. So I get more of a purplish haze. But because I'm using wet into dry, it does help me retain my whites. And I think if you saw my last video on skies, you'll see what I'm talking about. But wherever the water is, the watercolor is going to flow. So don't wet the whole page if you want to keep some of your white paper showing. It's safer. I might add here too that the page is now flat on my table. I haven't got it tilted. And some of the paint has bled into the sky area, and that's okay. I'm happy enough to leave it like that. I don't get in a knot about when I see paint blurring and furring out like that. This is a very relaxed technique, and I think it's rather fun to just see what the paint's going to do without you having to control it too much. Now I'm adding just a little bit more of the darker values. As you know, watercolour will dry a couple of shades lighter. So I can afford to be a little dangerous because my page is quite wet where I'm adding this paint. And I always like to use a zigzag motion of the paint flowing through my composition. The zigzag helps to meander the eye to that back line or to the horizon point. But that's what you want your viewer to do. You want your viewer to feel comfortable enough to keep on following the map, so to speak. Okay, so now I'm adding just a little bit of burnt sienna and the quinacridone coral, and I'm warming the composition up a little bit. And obviously it's going to grey out in certain areas against anything that might be a little bluish or greenish. But in the white areas, it's going to be rather a nice, clean gold colour. And I'm going to enhance that even more as the painting progresses. There's an area here that I'm pointing to. There was a back run, which made a cauliflower mark. So I have to work with that. So I'm going to bring my hill line up a little bit higher, and I'm going to make it look like I made that happen deliberately. Don't let your viewers know you made a mistake. But heaven knows we do make mistakes. I do. But that's good. It's fun to be able to redeem the mistakes. So I think I have there. It just allows the hill to go up a little higher, and I'll just keep filtering and bringing some of that colour mix into the rest of the composition. There's my zigzag just going through with the white areas, almost like a little stream. That's rather fun. And I'm bringing some of the trees on the right-hand side up into the skyline. Now I'm adding a little bit more of the more concentrated pigment, not so much water with this mix, but it's got more of the quinacridone coral into it. It's a gorgeous colour. Quinacridone coral is made by Daniel Smith. I love it. It's a really nice colour to use. Just meandering the colours through, and now I'm using my round brush. This is the number 8 round that I have, and it's damp. It's not wringing wet, and I'm actually soaking out some of the paint, and I've got a paper towel in my other hand that I keep wiping the brush in because I do not want to keep transferring dirty paint. But it's nice to just get a glow back into some of those areas and enhance some of my zigzag that I was trying to imply right from the get-go. I decide also to lift out a little bit of shrubbery or trees in this area on the right-hand side because it was starting to feel like that was a clump of bushes that was in front of that hill that I put in. And over the top of that, I add a little bit of the quinacridone coral so that it ties it in with the rest of the composition. and brings it forward a little bit. I'm using my little rigger now just to pop in some extra detail, a little bit more value here and there. But I got a little bit more control with the rigger. The fatter brush, or the brush that's got a wider amount of hair in it, is going to leave a much bolder mark. This one I've got a little bit more of a delicate mark to it. So assessing throughout my composition now where I might need a little touch here and there, a dot, a dash of dark, just to make it a little more interesting for the viewer, and to enhance the zigzag or the idea of whatever. It could be a stream or just a change of value within some paddocks or some fields. It's very important for me to get that back line of the horizon established a little bit more. Back to my number 8 round brush now. And now you can see why it didn't worry me to have some of the paint bleed into the sky in this area, because I've come right back in now. The sky's dry and I can really make some of this hill even a little more silhouetted. And you can't even see where it bled into the sky. And now the whole bottom area is dry again, so I'm now starting to pop in a little bit more value change to push some of that lovely gold tree forward, and again just reinforcing some of the horizon point area. I softly enhance my values again. I mean, it's essentially now a duochromatic painting, meaning 2 colours and various degrees of values within those 2 colours. So I still need to have some demarcation between the values for it to read in perspective for my viewer. So I have to keep popping in a little bit of dark here and there to make some of the middle values recede more. And that little white area that I'm coming in behind could almost be a little roof of a building, of a house or something. I'm not going to make it that, but it's almost becoming that on its own, which is nice. It's fun to see that happen with your paintings. I think it's rewarding, actually, to see a new thing develop out of a painting when you didn't really mean it to be there. Enhancing again with my beautiful quinacridone coral, and I'm being selective as to where I place this now, and it's glaze, so I'm not using a lot of water with it, but I'm being strategic where I'm putting it. It's not going to do any good putting it over the browny green areas, but it's nice putting it over the really light areas. And I'm using a paper towel just to take out some of the pigment if I've gotten a little overzealous with it. You don't want it to pop forward too much. Okay, well now it's a matter of tying the top part of my painting and the bottom part of my painting in together. So I'm using a little bit of a glaze within some of the cloud formations using my quinacridone coral. And that just helps the 2 halves of the painting come together. But I'm strategic again in where I put them. It's not going to be everywhere. And I'm using the paper towel just to blot out. I don't want it to be too strong. Okay, I think we're nearly at the end, and I want to thank you for staying with me, and I hope you enjoyed this video on a stormy sky with a little landscape. Thanks for visiting, and please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.